Okay, today's talk was an interesting one. I've been working on it for a little while, so it's kind of going through memory lane. But really what it's about is the White Gold District. It's actually been 10 years since our discovery, or at least since the beginning. So I thought I would basically, the idea is where we were, that was 10 years ago, where are we now in the cycle, and where do I think we're going to go? So that's the gist of the talk. So I'm going to, basically, it'll be kind of moving around, but the idea is that I'll show some graphs, and the idea is that I'm trying to set you guys up to actually understand where we really are in this cycle. And it wasn't until you start looking at graphs and plots that you actually start understanding it. So where were we? You know, 10 years ago, gold was $650. You know, gold exploration companies were mostly looking in the Tombstone intrusions north of the Tintina Fault. That's where all the action was. And we were just actually refining, I call it the art of soil sampling. Where are we now? Well, gold's up to $13.40 the other day. Kinross made the first move in the district a few years back. Goldcorp bought the second deposit, the coffee, and is planning to build the mine. And we're seeing a consolidation of various claims, and the majors are basically backing up the juniors. So the district is setting itself up nicely here. And where are we going? Is this really a gold camp? When do you call this a gold camp? And how many deposits do you need? And then how many deposits can be actually out there? And this is the last question of the day at the end of my talk. If this was a baseball game, which inning would we be in this exploration, basically, position? So this is kind of the highlights, like year 2007, Underworld optioned the claim, the original white claims. By 2008, they drilled the first discovery hole. You know, by 2009, they hit a hole 104 meters at 3.4 grams. That set the place on fire. And then by year 2010, Kinross bought them out. And at the same time, that was a double whammo. It's like a 1-2 punch. Kaminak drilled their discovery hole. So, but this is what I call ground zero. And credit goes to people like Jean Paultler, who's been working up there for 30 years. And this is her original assessment report. These are her claim blocks when she was working with Teck. And there's the coffee deposit right there, right on the edge. So I used this kind of her assessment report to basically start the initial exploration for the white. The next ground zero was basically Greg Gilson, 96, Del Tango, a junior. When gold was quite low, they were looking for another pogo. And look at his map. He's got actually, like this is, like he's painted the picture where the deposit is. So the idea is that there's a Supremo. There's the latte. The market had crashed and nobody was actually following these guys up. So that's my job as a prospector to, you know, 80% of this business is research and 20% execution. So let's look at the synopsis in the last 10 years of the gold cycle. Underworld optioned the white at this point. Underworld drilled the discovery hole right at this point in gold. Kaminak optioned the coffee project at this point. So gold's still starting to chug up there a little bit. Now this is when Kinross bought out Underworld. And that's when Kaminak drilled the discovery hole. So you could see how this ramp up was happening. And that was our peak of the market of 2011, and then basically this is where Goldcorp bought it out. So now it's kind of looking at this 10-year graph, but now what I'd like to do is show you the 30-year graph. Let's go back and actually understand where this position in time is, and is it very unique. So here's the gold cycle for the last 30 years. So that was the January 1980. Gold cracked 843. The world was on fire. And really, it was all based on the interest rates were 20%. Daily savings accounts were 12. I'd be happy if we got 5 in daily. So that's the whole point. That's what drove this market back then. My little things are up and down. So September 2089 was kind of an interesting time. And what it really was flow through was terminated. And actually gold and pretty well everybody was out of business by 89. So, and then the next kind of event that happened in 97 was the Bre-X hit our industry. Everybody was basically, our whole industry crashed. And that's actually, ironically, when I started prospecting in Yukon. So you could see we were pretty well in a downhill spin there. So, and then look at, by August 1999, gold was $261. Can we even imagine that today? Like, that's what's nuts. But this is when, this is when I'm still in the bush plugging away here. But look at this. Brewery Creek opened up a heat leach mine at these prices in Dawson. So that's why, like if these guys could do it back then, and they did a fabulous job, and they did a great reclamation. So this is June 2007, and that's when Underworld optioned the white 1 to 118 claims. So that block is now well over 3,500 claims, but that was the beginning. There was, and this is July 2008. Underworld drills the discovery hole at this point. So here you go, gold's starting to jump up, we're climbing the ladder. And then by May of 2010, gold's 1241. This is when Kinross jumped in and bought Underworld, and at the same time, Kaminak drilled the discovery hole. So here we go. We peak out in September of 2011. Gold hits the all-time high. So, but by, and this is May 2016, when the Gold Corp basically bought everybody out. So my basically point is if you look at this chart now and understand where we're sitting in there, we're actually kind of sitting in a good position. Like, we've upped the ante, gold's basically holding. But look at how quick those successions were. That's kind of what drove this whole crazy market here, or at least in the Yukon. So now let's analyze another graph, the claim staking. This was the Finlayson Lake staking rush in 1996. And that was basically our big staking rush. And so the idea was Finlayson Lake had about 28 to 30,000 claims staked. By 2010 and 11, everybody was worried that they were going to get left out, and there was pretty well close to 200,000 claims staked in that window. So now we'll go back. Now we'll go to the actual true exploration dollars spent in the ground. And now we're going back to 77. So this is when this rise in exploration is when gold climbed to over $800. This drop in this market here, that was based on flow through. The 89, when they canceled it, basically we were just starting to ramp up. Metal prices were on the way up, so that's what was driving the exploration. But we were still under 50 million bucks at the time. And then this flow through hit, and then literally that was 89, and everybody was out of work. And that's actually when I became a mushroom picker. Everybody got kicked out of the bush. So here's our exploration dollars again in the Finlayson Lake rush. So now you can see it ramped up. But this is when Bre-X hit. So now it just took all the wind out of our sails, and basically now you can see we're in this low trough. This little crash happened when the subprime hit us. We were starting to ramp up. 2009 we got hit again, and bang, we're out. So it's kind of this ebbs and webs, but when you actually Here we're starting to drop by 2012, and I call this lingering flow through. People were still, they raised all this money on this big hype in 2011, and we actually had to spend it. So that's kind of what happened that year, and then you can see how it just tanked by 2013. So the idea is that, like, all in all, compared to the last 40 years, we're actually still in a good position. So that's what I'm trying to get at is, like, when you start looking back in time, we're just actually getting into it in the last 10 to 15 years. Like, this is just starting to ramp up. And again, I always make the analogy, I come from the Timmins camp, where we've been looking for gold for 100 years. So the idea is that I think, you know, we have lots of legs. Here's just another one showing you the, that's the value of gold in red in the background compared to our exploration dollars following suit. So you can see they're tagging along, but when the actual, it's kind of interesting, like our crash that hit when the Bre-X hit, gold didn't really drop that much compared to, but it was still this trough below 400 bucks. And so part of the thing is, you know, to pose to you guys, would you guys be willing to invest in gold projects at 400 bucks? Probably not, but let's get the reality is that gold mines take, like the coffee is going to take about 10 to 12 years from discovery to production. So you have to actually get out in the bush and invest ahead of time and not just react to the market. This was, so I'll show, now I'm going to show a few pictures of various stages, but this was the Black Fox discovery up on Thistle Mountain. And what I'm showing here is the idea is that this area was like, it's on, there was 5 placer creeks draining this area all around this mountain. This is Thistle Mountain. And the idea is that there was a road running through between creeks. And on that road, there was a bunch of quartz like this. And you bang a rock 1,000 times, and lo and behold, we had some nice visible gold on that. It was right on the road. It was right at the, right on top of the mountain where all these placer creeks were draining from. And we were the first guy to find this in 100 years. And they've been mining placer on each side of this creek for over 100 years. So this was my aha moment when I looked around. There was hardly a claim in the district within 20, 30 miles. And I felt like, you know, the Maytag salesman out alone, nobody around. And that's what I couldn't believe. The Yukon is basically alive and well here. Like, this is just going to take off. This was 2004. I call this a rock is found. And the idea is that this was when I was with Mike. Mike Berkey basically took us out when he was working for the government. And I had found a rock, and we went and I was tracking down one of Gene Paultler's float from down the hill. And I had found that in the summer, and it came back. And this is what its surface expression was. But, and we were kind of half looking for the old rumor of Ogilvy's rumor from 1887 that he actually made a note that someone had found a high-grade quartz vein about the mouth, above the mouth of the White. So, and this was it. So we ended up that year, or within the next couple of years, but this was the next year, we brought these little can digs. And they were really good diggers, better than 6 guys with shovels. They could work with 2.5 gallons of gas in a day, and we could move around with the helicopter. But we're just uncovering the vein. Now you'll see what this vein looks like. Here it is. Turned out to be a nice vein. This is the original spot I'm standing on. And so there was 3 nice big veins, and ends up that this wasn't where the deposit was, but it was kind of what got us in there. But the point is it's kind of this rock and a notation from Gene's assessment report that drew me in there. And then I followed up, and then we add another layer. And now when we dug this thing out, that led to an auction. And part of this was funded by the YMEP. And you have to, you know, say thanks to the government here, because they actually backed me up pretty well every step of the way with these small $10,000 grants. So the world ended up, once we kind of caught on to how to look for these things, I call it soils, was the true path to discovery, because 2 to 3% outcrop exposure, you're not gonna, the probability of me finding a rock with gold in it is extremely low. So we went into this soil mode, and I'll show you how far we took it. But the idea is that we kind of took it to a whole new level, but we had to basically, these large soil programs really needed these training programs. Like we needed we needed an army out there. And so that's what we did with Ground Truth. We basically started training 2 to 3 week training programs ahead of time. And you could see how, like this is one crew. We trained about 4 to 5, well we had 4 crews. Eventually we had 100 people trained up. And the idea is that we went from training programs to helicopters to everything, chainsaws, basically bear defense, the whole 9 yards. Because we were going to teach you how to be a commando, so I could throw you out of a helicopter and pick you up at the end of the day and you could survive. So that was part of this big key. Now I'll show you the life cycle of this. So here we are. This is 9/11. This is 2001, 97 soils. Mike was trying to get me out there, Berkey, with Ken, and we got actually grounded that day. But that was the Lucky Joe. But you know, that was the first time we used ICPMS with Acme. We used augers. We had GPSs. That was Dave. You know, that was the first trials of this. You can see by 2002 with Copper Ridge, we ended up putting 1,500 soils. 2003, Kennecott came in and optioned it from basically from Copper Ridge. And so now we're up to 4,000 soils. We kept going, and you can see the steady pace. We're only up to 18,000 soils. Soils, I look like, you know, like they're like lotto tickets, like pull tabs. The more you pull on them, you know, you're working with the probability. So this is what happened in the next few years after that. 2007, you can see now, basically down in the white, that's when we were starting to work on the white. I optioned the white. Adrian and Underworld guys believed in the science of soils. So we started 2007, there was about 8,000. In 2008, there was about 3,400. Now we're starting to gain traction because we just, at this point, 2009, that's when Kaminak came in and optioned it, and they liked the science. So now you can see us, we're working down in the coffee area, and we're starting to block out, because Kinross had bought out Underworld at this point in that field season in 2010, and we just beefed up this block. But you could actually start to see what we're doing here. We're doing a pile of recon, ridges and spurs. Where else are these things tagging? So now we're up to 121,000. And, you know, 2010 was 56,000. The largest soil sampling program I've ever heard about at this point was about 65,000, and that was in Mongolia. But I said, you know what? We could actually ramp this thing up even more. And this is what happened by 2011. We did 108,000 just in this district alone. Ground Truth actually did 170,000 across the Yukon. But you could see that big, basically, but you could see now our coverage. We're starting to get crazy good coverage in the last few years. So, but look what our total's up. We're up to 285,000 at this point by 2015. So we started dropping because, you know, there was hardly anybody out there, but we were still plugging away. And then by 2016, we started ramping up with white gold. 2017, Agnico came in and backed us up. And then we started hitting the pavement hard again. So the idea is that that's roughly 345,000 soils. The idea is that that's worth about $26 million in exploration, just for soil geochemistry. And I guess my take is, you know, a lot of people look at this and going, really? Like this many soils, do we really need it? And would you do it ahead of time for the cost of $26 million bucks? But if you actually believed in the district, and $26 million directly leads you to 7.5 million ounces so far and growing, you know, this was prime. The only guys I ever heard doing this was Anglo in Colombia when they spent 40 million doing their work back in the 90s. I think it was in the 90s. So the point is this worked. And then I'll show you at the end the results, where we hit new gold showings on this. So this was part of the help, you know, like there was a bunch of little moving parts to this whole discovery. But what really helped was, like, look at the new staking regulations by 2008 had turned in. And now, instead of using these big posts, we're using little 2x2s. And we were allowed to tag at the same time. And then the groupings had changed all at once. And the groupings kind of did what they ended up doing was, instead of 16 claim groupings, we're allowed 750 claims. So instead of staking 400 claims, if you were going to spend a lot of money, you might as well stake, you know, 700, because you could hold it in the grouping. So it was kind of a little catch-22 there. But it was part of what I thought was needed. I don't know about that big of blocks or groupings, but the idea is that it helped secure fairly significant land packages. And, you know, hence why Attack owns over 100 miles of ground. And so the idea is that for the majors to come in, because they need the big back 40. But where this really helped us out on is these guys. Because this is what we used to use to move our posts around, like 4x4s with these helicopter loads. It was nuts. You could build a whole bunch of houses. We had one company bring 2 semi-loads of 4x4s on a stake and rush one year. It was nuts. So now I could load up with 2x2s, the helicopter, instead of using these big 4x4s. I could load up like, well, you don't have enough fuel to fly around all day with you run out of fuel first instead of posts. But you used to be going back for post every 20 minutes or something. So that really kind of upped the ante. So, and just to give you an idea, what we used to do, like, you know, it's cheaper to actually make your own posts in the bush for the stakers. But if we go on a run and you get the right pilot, I could drop a post every 45 seconds. Some pilots were as low as 38 seconds. So we would just mow the country down with the post drops, because it would take about 20, 25 minutes for a staker to make a post. So if we actually pre-set out the post for him, we could actually get, instead of 8 links, we could get 12 links. So we increased our efficiency by dropping posts, these smaller ones. So, and this is kind of what happened. So this is what I'm getting at. Here's our, basically, May 2007. We only have about 6,500 claims in the district. Here's the white, here's the coffee. So you can see we're kind of sitting alone, because I actually own most of, like I own that claim, that claim, that claim. We own this claim block. So there was nobody around us. Where that discovery, what I was telling you, the Black Fox was right here. So, and this is the Kirkman claim. So there was really nobody in this district, and we had this one too, and the Tony Tagger. So that was my point. This is 2007. Nobody's moving yet. 2009, boom. So Underworld had actually announced that nice hole, 100 meters at 3 point some grams. Now you could see what happened in this district, right in here. So people are taking position. So this was basically part of Underworld's project. But it didn't really go too far. And we just beefed up the original coffee project. And who actually had just moved in over here was part of, ends up it was Independence Gold eventually that picked or got that ground, but it was through a North Gate and Equity Engineering was working that. So by July of 2010, so now we actually had the buyout of the white from Kinross, and we actually had the coffee first hole discovery. So now you can see how this is starting to build up. This thing starts to fill up. Now people are moving in. But this is, watch what happens next. Like now the feverish pitch was starting to hit. And the irony was, like I could kind of pin it down to, I was now given a talk in Toronto at this point. And there was quite a big audience. And someone asked at the end of the talk, They said, Shawn, if we go up to the Yukon and stake a claim and do soils like you do, are you telling us we'd be the first people in history to do that? And I said, yep. And you could have heard a pin drop. And like the room scattered. And this is what happened by 2011. People just started flowing up here. And now we're up to 61,000 claims at that point. So we tenfolded the stake and the claims. But like I said, some of that had to do with posts, some of that had to do with grouping, and this was the romance of the Klondike that kicked in, and everybody was on a tear. So by 2013, we're still holding a few claims because the lingering, because they spent some money. But by 2014, she's waning. 2015, the claims are dropping now. And then they dropped to a low of 2016. But kind of what's kind of going on right at this point is there's consolidation going on. Guys are picking up at their ground. So, and now we start pretty well holding steady now, and everybody's hunkered in. So there's no, like, so this is kind of what we're at the moment. So it's kind of interesting, like we have big land packages and there's some key people in different spots now. And I'll chat about them after. But this was fun. You see these Intera maps, I was trying to track these things down. Here's 2009, there's when the Underworld. By 2010, you don't see Underworld because they got picked up. And now basically, because Kinross picked them up, but Adrian ran over and we basically staked a bunch more claims and put them in his smash company. But you can see Kaminak now is fully flush right to the casino road now. Yeah, so it was kind of, and then this is what it looked like by 2011. And so the idea is that there's all kinds of names in here. And that's what's kind of, you know, that's what they call a true staking rush. Everybody shows up, from the Habaneros to Solomon to everybody. So everybody was trying to get their piece. And that's what's kind of fun sometimes, because you never know. Like, you know, sometimes I don't quite believe in closeology, but, you know, it works sometimes that you never know where the showings are going to pop up. So, but this is what I feel is going to give us the advantage going forward now, is we got a bunch of new technology working for us. And this was kind of proved on the coffee project. This little drill drilled about 65% of the coffee's resource. It's basically the guys build them in Kelowna. We put them on rubber tracks with ground truth. But the idea is that these RCs or RABs could punch a 100-meter hole in a 12-hour shift in the Yukon. They could get on the coffee. They were getting their 200 meters every 24 hours. And they're about, for RC, it's about 2/3 the cost of diamond drilling, and RAB is about 1/3 or less the cost for basically diamond drilling. And the idea is that, so that's helping, because now we can actually drill 12 months of the year if we want. Nobody wants to drill in January, but the coffee guys started in February with 3 RCs and drilled basically, you know, they could drill to the end of November. So this is what we started bringing in, was drones with ground truth. These live, basically, this is a hammer drill that we use instead of the hose. Punches down, basically I could get production 250 meters a day, 50 samples on 5-meter spacings with a live XRF zapping, no environmental liabilities. You actually don't even see, because we don't even cut a line anymore. We just did a big jump this year, and we're using these special GPSs to actually map out where we're going to take it. So, like, now really our efficiency went from what would cost me, like in 2011, it would be seasons. You'd have to wait for the next season for your data to come in to go and trench. Now I'm processing what would normally take us $500 to $600 in 2 field seasons. I could do it in a month for about $100,000, and before it was about $500,000 or $600,000. So that's what I'm saying. That's the kind of, and that's what we use, you know, to sell the white gold idea to people like Agnico. This is the other big thing. This was actually part of the long-term key. We needed, because I really believe this is a long-term project. Like, this is going to go, well, my pin the tail on the donkey, we're going to see this for the next 40 years at least. this district go. But the idea is that the Yukon government, Sandy, managed to get a deal going with the feds, and we have this basically $360 million to build infrastructure roads. So what that's going to do is they're going to beef up this kind of road system, and you can see how really it does help White Gold Corp, but everybody else in there, because these are all my old claims that I sold to these guys. But the idea is that I call it like, it's like we're pushing the road to the back of the mushroom patch from my mushroom picking days. And the idea is that we'll be able to, now we're in the back, and we'll be able to work that whole system. And the idea is that even if I don't now find a 2 million ounce deposit, which was kind of the number I was supposed to get, if I find 400,000 ounces in an open pit, we could actually truck that to the mill. And that's what Goldcorp does in Timmins. They're actually trucking ore 100 miles. So, to the mill. So that's what that road is going to do to us. That has actually secured the long-term future to this district. So here's a little bit of memory lane with Underworld. There's Adrian Fleming. And, you know, we need key guys that take the vision. And that's kind of, when I was going through this talk, it was kind of cool. When we actually look at some of the companies, you know, people have been kind of, they love the Yukon, they love working here, and they're persistent. Here's the original Underworld trenches, very shallow, and that was kind of the aha moment that made us realize, you know, the soils are working. Now that's one level, but I have to get a little bit deeper. And this was a serendipity. Hannah and her partner at the time, they're Adam, 2 geos. They were from Australia. They had actually never seen a trench ever before, really, in Australia. So when I looked at that, I said, my God, the Prince Edward Island potato farmers dig deeper holes than this. Like, what's going on here? But they actually had sampled it all. And just this low-level, unbiased sampling was the trick to actually this trenching program and these can digs. So, you know, serendipity happens. There's basically the Underworld camp. And that was the discovery hole right here. And that was the size of their little drill camp back in 2008. So here's Jean. She's been basically working the district literally for 30 years. She was with Tech. And here's Ricardo. He's passed away, but he was a cool guy. And he basically was kind of the guy that basically gave me the confidence in this soil sampling program, because he was working with Kennecott. And he was actually the guy who backed me up on a recce regional that actually tapped into the, like, we knew where the white was, but he gave me a better budget, and we went to sample the back end towards the Golden Saddle. And ironically, it was a JV with these guys. We actually found 4 gold showings, the Black Fox, the IND, the white, and there was, I think, one more in there. And their management said, Ricardo, we actually want copper gold. And he just found gold. So we don't want to do nothing with him. So they gave me, so I was allowed to take my data and take off with it. And then he showed back up a few years later with the Underworld guys. But the idea was that little JV helped us out. And I actually had a government YMEP grant. So I leveraged that grant with the Kennecott guys to actually run about that was a 3,000 soil program, or 2,500. But here we are with Isaac sitting next to the discovery holes, hole 4 and 5 there. This is what some of the core looks like. Thought I'd throw some core pictures in there. But look at the grades. You know, these are some high grades, but yeah, it's kind of magical when you finally tap in. Because to give you an idea, the surface expression of this deposit was only 37 meters. And the first drill hole was 18 meters of 4, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, as they say. This is so meanwhile, the white is going on. And I come to the Underworld guys, they actually didn't even really want to, in 2008, look at the coffee because they were too busy. So with Rob and Craig Finnegan, they optioned it, and we did some soils. I had some soils before on a YMEP. But look at this. This is day one. We're starting the trenching program on the T3 and T4 and T5. So it's in the middle of nowhere with a little hoe. And then here's our hoe, and Gene's out visiting. So here we are again. This is actually trenching the latte. That's the first shovels of the latte. Here's Mike Berkey in the background coming to visit us. And so that ends up, there's 1.5 million ounces plus under that thing. And here's the T3, the Discovery T3 zone, the trench. Isaac's standing by it. So it was kind of a, but look at this. You see, here's the trench here. That we were actually missing. We had smoke, but we weren't actually over it. And we kind of felt like a bonehead because we had to turn the hoe around and dig through rocks to find, like, and I'm kind of going, well, usually we dig for rocks, but here we got to dig through the rock pile because the soil anomaly was coming from somewhere there. Ends up like we're literally within 5 meters away from it. And that's the point here. If we would have basically drilled based on that and just kind of got rammy, we could have missed this so easy. This is what some of the rocks look like when we dug them out. You know, this is actually a cool picture. I like it because it reminds me of the latte and the Supremo structure. The micro to the macro. I actually mapped it out years before. You know, this was in 2009. This is what happened. I kept pushing them to stake more ground, because this ends up when we found the initial goal, we knew it wasn't based on lithology like the white was kind of looking like, or it had better rocks. It liked the gneissic rocks. This, because we found gold in 3 different kind of rocks based on the geochemistry, that we knew it had to be a structure, a story. So I said, let's not fool around. Let's just mow this thing down. And ironically, this was the sugar soil anomaly that I actually found, and it's like 20-some kilometers away. When we were working this, when we first discovered that, we did a big recce, and we tripped over it, so we staked a few claims on it. Hence, this was the coffee, this was the cream and the sugar from the 2006-07 era. But anyways, they mowed right, like, you know, I sold them that, and then we kept going right to the Casino Road system. So now they had a big package, and hence now Goldcorp's got a monster package to work for the next, 30 years. But while that was going on, a little company, Rasul, Comstock Metals, bugged me for a little claim block, and it was right over here. Like we're right by the white now, and we're looking downriver, and just over here, across the river, on this same, here's the golden saddle, here's the mag, on the same magnetic feature, that's where the QV popped up. Like, we shouldn't be surprised at this as explorationists. It's kind of like mushrooms where you find one, there's more. So, and that turned out to be, but this is what I want to show you. And this is kind of what I want to tease everybody on is, look at how subtle this was. If this was in the white or the coffee claim block, we would have never found this. And the only reason why we found it was because Rasul really didn't have any other soil anomaly. So he kept putting money at it. So watch this. So here's our ridges and spurs. We got a few hits, but that's a few hits, and okay, we found something. So then we gridded it by August of 2000, and we got something happening here. Like, I wouldn't be getting all excited, but then we went and detailed it. That turned out to be a nice little spot. And now we got these other flyers here. But so then we came in, and Gene's working on this. Oh, and like Gene actually found the first rock that had VG on that one too in the trenches. So, she's been around. I call her the ferret, basically, because you drop her out of the helicopter, 9 times out of 10 she finds the gold. So, but this is what happened when they drilled under that. They had 89 meters at 2.35 grams. Another discovery. And this thing, you could see the river, and it's right across from the Kinross project. But that's what I'm getting at, the subtlety of these anomalies. So when I was going through, I said, the cool part about this is we actually have some Jerry's like a lifer. He's been up here since '76 working the Yukon. So he's basically been holding the fort with Kinross, or Pacific Ridge, And the idea is that he was looking right next to this placer goldfield on Scroggy. I was there and I missed it a few years before that. I didn't get far enough out. But the idea is that here's the coffee and here's the the white, that they basically, they're on another placer creek with no signs of anything. And sure enough, they actually found some nice, they outlined a big 3.5 kilometer basically zone. And they pulled out almost 40 meters at 2.4 grams. So again, like, where are these things coming from? There's independence. She was just talking earlier. And the idea is that, like, now, see, Goldcorp basically bought a position in because they're straddling the coffee project. But look at the size of this soil anomaly they pulled out. And they just did that. Like, they're finding this year. Like, where, like, you know, this is what I'm going, like, where this is still happening. Then we even have people like Goldstrike. Like, Chornaby's been up here since the 90s, plugging away, and kudos to them. It's chaotic sometimes, but kudos, because, so here they are, here's the white, here's the coffee. Like, they just pulled up a nice soil anomaly, and they basically pulled up some drilling results of basically 22 meters of 5.2 grams this year. So, again, this is where I'm kind of going. Where do you think we are in the picture here? And then you got Peter Tallman's kind of new to it, but he was with Ethos originally, back working close to my Betty project by the coffee. But he basically took over the Klondike Gold as president, and he's plugging away, chasing these old timers, and he's finding some new stuff. So the idea is that, that's where I'm getting at. The camp is consolidated a little bit. So from jockeying to position, from white gold to like Pacific Ridge and Independence. So the idea is that now we're kind of in the flow of it. Like, the hype was at the beginning. Now people are going year after year. They're starting to pick up more data. So this is kind of the end of the talk here. So how did we do in the discovery part? So there's the big soil database. And, you know, I dare anybody to tell me there's a better spot than this, that one we just found, since 2007, in the last 10 years. These were all the gold, brand new gold showings in rocks. There's over 30 of these things. They're there. And it's the soils that are finding them. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at is, my take is really, if we're basically in a baseball game, I think we're only in the third inning going into the fourth. Like, this is just starting to ramp up. Our databases are solid. We have lots of airborne. We're getting better understanding metallurgically from modeling, MDRU helping us out. So with this roads, new technology, drilling, I kind of think we're just getting ready to take off. And so, yeah, this is my take. So, thank you. Any questions? Yep. To do what? There's talk, but most of us don't want that. Like, there's a double-edged sword to computerized staking. So, but like right now, I don't know if it wouldn't help us, because we're pretty well settled now in. Like, there could be some new claims to stake, but there's hardly been any new like claim staking going on in a sense. So, but the Bush guys don't want to do that, and Vancouver guys do. So.